In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the pattern editor. Now, although programming patterns is actually a lot more fun using the machine hardware, we're going to be looking just at the software side of things first for this video, just so we can get familiar with everything that's available. I think we'll find it much easier learning the hardware once you understand what's going on under the hood. So here we are in the pattern editor, and it's this section here. Now I'm going to start by loading in some simple sounds. We're just going to use samples, and I'm going to use these to demonstrate a couple of things about the pattern editor. So first of all, you'll notice I've got this first sound selected here, and because I've got auto load on down here, whatever sample I click on, I get to preview it and hear it, but it also loads up automatically onto this focused sound here. Now to start with, I'm just going to show you how to enter in an event. So we can go into the blank space over here and double click, and we've entered in an event. Now I can click it again and just drag it around. And so if you've ever used a DAW, you'll find this to be very familiar. Now we happen to be using the select tool, which is this tool right down here, and there are two other tools. There's paint. Now if I click again, they're erased. And with this tool, I can hold down and just fill in the events like that, but I can't actually do any selection. This is the erase tool here. And I can use this to thin out the pattern. So I'm going to hit play. And you can see we've got a 1-bar loop. Now I can change the length of this loop over here, but I'm going to leave it on 1 bar for now. Okay, let's move on to our next sound. I know that I want a kick, so I'm going to click on kick here. I'm going to type in 909. Now let's enter that in, but first I can't be using the erase tool to put in an event, so I'm going to right click and go to paint. Let's take a listen. I'm going to switch these out now. Let's go to a different tom. Let's take away this 909. I want to see what other options there are. That's good. Now I actually want to enter a couple more events in here. So I'm just going to enter these in. And then I'm going to go to my select tool, and I want to change the velocity. So let's move this section up here so we can see it a little bit more clearly. And I'm going to adjust the velocity like so. Let's take a listen. That's sounding good. I can add a little swing here. Let's add in a clap. And I can adjust the preview volume here because some of these are a little bit loud. This is a good one. Now I actually have a volume control right here. And this right here is panning. Okay, let's move on to the next sound, and I'm going to add in a shaker. I'm actually just going to take the paint tool and fill this in. Now I have one that I found earlier that I favorited, so if I click on this star, it'll show up. Now the one issue with this is because of the space in the beginning of the sample, it doesn't line up well. If I show you the actual sample, you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to click on this icon here. This will bring up the actual sample settings. And if we go to edit, you can see the waveform right here. And this is the space in the beginning, which makes it sound kind of off time. So we can either bring forward the start time like this, or we can keep this attack as it is. I'm going to leave this mode now and go back to the event edit. And I'm just going to shift the events themselves around. So I'm going to grab my select tool. I'm going to get rid of all these notes and just focus on these 4. Okay, now I'm just going to make some adjustments to the velocity, just to add a bit more groove. And I'm going to duplicate these events. So I'm just going to select them. And I'm just going to click back on this slot here just to make sure I'm focusing on the right sound. And now if I hit Command D on the Mac or Control D on the PC, that's going to duplicate these events. And now I've just replicated that little pattern with the velocity changes. And I just need to move this now a little bit forward. So right down here we've got our grid settings. And I can either switch to something more fine like 32 or 64, or just take the grid off completely so that now we're not snapping to the grid anymore. So in this mode, let me just select these again. And I'm going to grab the ends here and just make them shorter. I'm just going to move them forward a little bit. See how I can move these and not quite snap to the grid. So the way I'm going to do this is just select the first event here. I'm going to put it on the end somewhere. That'll do for now. And I'm going to actually just move all of these just a little bit early. And I'm going to line this one up properly at the end. Great, now I can turn snap back on if I want to. And that's just where I want it. So let's move on now to a couple other features. Let's take a look at mutes and solos. If we go to the left of this orange line here, we can mute these parts. Now if you right click, or in my case since I'm using a MacBook, control click, you'll see that I can solo a part too. Now when I come out of this solo, by right clicking again, everything will be unmuted. So even though this was muted, it now comes back. Okay, so those are a few basics. Let's explore this interface a little bit more. I just want to show you that over here, we've got two icons right here, and if you notice, you can click on this and drag. So what these allow you to do is export the patterns. So we can either export the MIDI, and so I could either drag this onto my desktop, or if I loaded Maschine as a plugin in my DAW, I could drop it right into the DAW. And this is the same with the audio. I can drag this onto my desktop and it will give me an audio clip of this loop. Or if I was in a DAW, I could drag it onto an audio track and get the audio sample that way. So it's a very quick way of exporting your beats. Now I'm just going to add something melodic now. So let's come out of the drums section here, go to one shots, and let's click on chord. And you'll notice I've got the star selection on, so these are just my favorites. And there's a sound here that I quite like. I believe it's this one. Let me click on an empty sound first. Okay. Okay, so this is looking good. Now, I just want to note that if you don't see the MIDI velocity right here, you might be in this mode, and this is for automation of other parameters. If you want to get rid of this whole section altogether, you can just click on that button right there. Now, as we're in melodic mode here, say I want to change the note. How would I do that? If we come over to here, you'll see a piano roll. And this piano roll shows you the notes for any sound that you've actually selected. So if we go to focus on the shaker, it's right here. And I can actually transpose these. And I could enter in some new notes here. I'm going to grab these and just make them a little bit quieter. And you can just highlight all these notes and move them around to transpose everything. So those are the three different modes here. We've got our event view, we've got a chromatic view, and we can actually look at the sample as well. So those are the basics of entering and editing a pattern. But if you take a look at this section, you'll notice this keeps changing as I click on different sounds. So this gives us access to a whole number of other parameters. But for now though, I just want to move on and show you something else. Let's say we want to go back and change this conga. So I could go to the browser and find those samples all over again, or I could just click on this magnifying glass here, and it'll take me right back to the section I was looking at earlier. And we'll do the same here with this chord. And so on until I found a nice complementary selection. Now you may have noticed that we're in pattern 3 according to this. If I double click on this, I can name it whatever I like. Just call it Groove 1. But it's important because there are a number of different patterns that we're going to be creating in time. So if I click on this drop down menu here, you can see there are actually a number of different patterns. And somehow I've come on and created 3 without realizing it. But that's no worry. I'll just click on an X here and click on this X as well. And we'll just move this up. So this is the beginning. So this is now our first pattern. Notice here on the grid, this mirrors the control on the hardware that we'll be looking at a little bit later on. But what this represents is how the patterns are mapped to machine's pads. This is now on pad 1 on the machine controller. I'm going to come out of this menu for now. And we're going to just look at 2 more details before we conclude this video. I want to show you up here that we have access to the hierarchy, so to speak. Currently we're looking at the sound. That's what's highlighted right here. We're looking at the bongo. If I go up to group, we're now looking at the entire group. Now the reason this is useful is because we could load a plugin here, say a compressor, and it would apply to the entire group. So let's load up the compressor. You can hear that taking effect there. Finally, we can go up to the master. So this is the final output of machine, and you might load up something like, say, a limiter, just to make sure we don't go over 0. Now the other detail I want to show you here is that we can actually name the entire group. You can double click up here. I'm just going to call this drums. And let's say I get rid of these chords, and we open up a new group for melodic sounds, such as chords. So notice how I've just created a new group, and it's on its own individual track up here. And I can now load in an entirely new set of sounds onto this group and keep them separate from the first group. And this will be really handy later on when we come into arranging the patterns in the scene editor. So that's it for this video on the pattern editor. Of course, there are more details that I haven't covered here, but we're going to be looking at those in the coming videos. For now though, this gives you the basic idea of how to use it and what you can do with it. So in the next video, we're going to do more or less the same thing, but with the machine hardware itself. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.